took this video at the Bradford Industrial Museum at Moorside Mills. Our club, the Bradford Model Engineering Society, was celebrating their centenary and staged a small exhibition at the museum. Unfortunately, I lost this video, and I've only recently recovered it from my archive. I thought it had been erased, but luckily I've found it again, so I've decided to upload it. So I hope our members will find it interesting. Moorside Mills was built around 1875 as a small worsted spinning mill by John Moore, and the ownership of this mill changed many times, and they developed and grew. In 1970, Bradford Council bought Moorside Mills from Messrs W and J Whitehead to create this lovely museum. The Bradford Industrial Museum has permanent displays of textile machinery, steam power, engineering and motor vehicles, along with various other exhibitions. These tourist houses were actually pulled down and rebuilt on the site here. They were originally workers' tourist houses for the mill workers. I think it was called Gaythorne Terrace. When I was a tiny tot, we lived in a house very similar to this. They were just a one up, one down, and gaslit. This rear entrance allows you to go upstairs to see the various time period exhibition. Here we see a typical front room in one of these cottages. The washing bowl there, and place for hanging your washing, and the old range at the back. There's the old tin bath which people used to use in their front room. And I remember when I was a tiny tot, Mum used to bathe me in a large ceramic bowl which she used to use for baking in, and I remember tipping it over, water all over the place. Incidentally, in the house we lived in, where the floor was stone flags. Now when you go upstairs, as I showed earlier, the rear entrance, there's different rooms done out in different periods of time. This could be 60s, I'm not sure. I really should have read the information a little bit closer. But they're all done out of different periods of time, different styles. It's very interesting. There's various other things of interest. This looks to be possibly 1920s or 30s, not really sure. All nicely laid out. This one looks to me like 1950s style, or maybe even early 60s. As I said, I'm not really sure. I should have paid more close attention to the information. Various Fisher Price toys by the look of it. Little record player. This is a Fisher Price because I still have one of these, which belonged to my children, and it still works, and it's got all the records. The Bradford Model Engineering Society is one of the oldest modelling societies in Britain, and it goes back to the 1900s, or it even could be earlier than that, when a bunch of chaps in Bradford met in a cafe, a local cafe, and discussed the making of models. The hobby appears to have waned a little, as from 1904 there's no record until about 1908, when the same group met again to form a society. One of these men was Mr. Amos Barber, and another chap called Mr. Biggerdike. Mr. Alt, Mr. Cordingley, and others were instrumental in forming this society. A lot of Amos Barber's models are on permanent display at the Bradford Industrial Museum. An interesting fact also is that the Bradford Model Engineering Society is recorded as the 4th oldest model engineering society in the world. And of course, Bradford Model Engineering Society do have a large boating section, and they're based at Whipsey Park, and their clubhouse is at the side of the large ponds there. The 7¼ inch and 5 inch gauge ground level track and 5 inch and 3.5 inch gauge race track are based at Northcliffe Woods. Here's Mr. Ken Shipley with his display. Here are some more models which are on permanent display at the museum. There's quite a lot of models on display in this museum, and some of them are going back a lot of years, 100 years or more. And the workmanship, when you look on some of them, is amazing. These are some of the permanent displays in the museum. As can be seen here, it's not all mechanical which is on exhibition at the museum. There is a big variety of items. We're now in the, as it says there on the sign, the Motive Power Gallery. This is for me one of the most interesting parts of the museum, especially these old machine tools of the millwright shop. There's various overhead drives supported by the columns there. When I first started my apprenticeship in 1963, some of the machines in the place where I worked, which was Boldy and Sons, Textile and General Engineers, some of the machines they used were very similar to these really ancient things, belt driven. I actually worked on some belt driven shapers and lathes, as well as a planer. It's a pity these machines weren't running at the time of this video. They do run them on occasions. Now this machine is actually one very similar to which I once worked on when I was an apprentice, as I mentioned. It's a travelling edge shaper, and the one I actually had occasion to use was a Joseph Whitworth travelling edge shaper, belt driven. I've often wondered what became of those old machines which were in the place where I worked. They do have a lot of these machines running, especially the steam engines. It's at certain times of the day and week, so if you actually visit this place, you really need to look up and find out what time they are running. It's a pity I got my timing wrong, because when these steam engines are running, they're really impressive to watch. In this gallery there's quite a selection of cars and vans built by the Jowett Company of Bradford. And this bright yellow van was used by the local paper Telegraph and Argus. All Argus vans were all painted bright yellow at one time. This vehicle is a three-wheeler manufactured by Scott, which were based at Shipley. A very popular motorcycle in the day was Scott, and they were water cooled. More examples of Scott motorcycles and combinations. Another popular motorcycle made locally at Cleckheaton, the Panther. A powerful motorcycle, and were very popular with sidecar outfits. In the same gallery there's various models of steam locomotives and a full-size engine. This is called Nellie. Nellie's an 040 saddle tank industrial loco, number 1435. It was one of two built by Hudswell Clark in Leeds in 1922, and it worked at the local Eschalt sewage works. As a schoolboy in the 50s, I remember seeing this working, as we had a school visit to the Eschalt sewage works to show the workings of the place. I also remember the pong as well. In this corner there's two large locomotives on display. This one on the right hand side, this large northeastern engine, is 10.25 inch gauge. A little tale about this: two members of our Model Engineering Society, the late Mick Gray and Peter Vary, reconditioned this. They did some work on it many years ago, and when they'd finished, Mick Gray suggested to Peter that they give a trial steam up of it. I don't think it happened. Peter Vary, who was the boiler inspector, wasn't too happy about doing this. Incidentally, Peter Vary was a professional boiler inspector, and we were very lucky to have him as a member of our society. Incidentally, this engine appeared in an article in the early 1900s in the Model Engineer just after the engine was built, and also I believe in the same Model Engineer there were advertisement for the castings for the engine. Here we see more of the cars that's on display. Oh, I think this car is in need of some TLC. No doubt it'll happen, it'll be restored. Well, if you're specifically interested in Jowett cars, this is This is definitely one of the places to visit. Well, we're just going up to the other floor now in this old-fashioned type lift. We're going to see all the textile machinery. These machines have a lot of interest to me, as I started out as an apprentice in the textile and general engineering. We used to make lots of parts for these type of machines.
Winding.
The number of mills that used to be in Bradford years ago were phenomenal. They were everywhere. It was just a whole sea of mill chimneys. It was famous for its wool combing and also the soft water which Bradford is supplied with. The very soft water which we get here in Bradford, it means that you don't get scaled up kettles and boilers like you do further down south. You do get a little bit, but it really is only a small amount, and you don't have to be descaling every 2 minutes like you do in some other places. And it's also pleasant to taste is the water. And us model engineers running steam locos, we don't see a lot of scaling in our small locos.
If you release this then, that drops the shaft down close. One of the reasons why the wove narrow cloth like this is because you have to physically throw this through with your hand. And you can only do it as far as you can reach. So you couldn't weave a really wide piece of cloth because you couldn't get the shell out.
The high demand for worsted used for military uniforms during the First World War saw numerous expansions to the factory, including the addition of 2 extra floors and a clock tower, which was erected as a war memorial in 1919. In 1929, the mill was sold to W.A.J. Whitehead, who ran the ring spinning machine, which is still in the spinning gallery today. The background narration is very informative. If you don't know anything about textiles or textile processes, it's very interesting. Here's various weaving machines, all in nice condition, all in full working order. It's just a shame that I timed it wrong, because normally these are working, and as I was videoing, I've probably at the wrong time, because probably sometime later in the day they'll be working. And here you can see an example of when the machines are in use on demonstration. Here we see the large coat of culture. Appropriate, I would have thought, because Bradford has just won the City of Culture 2025. Must apologise for the jerkiness of this video. It's an old camera I was using at the time, and it hasn't got image stabilisation built in. This section here is for testing the actual textile material. It's amazing the complexity of some of these textile machines, and some of them will be over 100 years old and still working. As an apprentice, I remember making many parts for these type of machines. I once machined one of these large noble comb racks. They're called racks, but actually they were a large circular internal gear. And I had to machine one of these to face one up. And it was done on a large lathe with an 8-foot diameter faceplate. And it was very tricky to position with the block and tackle. This machine, known as a punch, was also made by Baldy and Sons, but in a much more advanced and modern version than the one shown here. And they were quite well known for their punches, was Baldy's. I used to machine the 2-inch diameter 4-start square thread shafts for these machines at one time. The item with 2 wheels and a pulley shown here, we used to call them doffer boxes. And one of the jobs I used to do as an apprentice was to machine an item called doffer forks. And all the fitting was done by hand, and everything was scraped in. I think these were called twisting or spinning. I just can't remember exactly which. It's really amazing the amount of different machines used in the woolen industry. It's mind-boggling at times. And you've also got the wool comb inside of it. And this section represents the testing of the textiles and yarns. It's quite an extensive and interesting section, is this, and it's amazing the amount of scientific instruments used just to test textiles and the yarn and various other things of textiles. Amazing and very, very interesting. Well, it's clocking out time, and that's basically the end of our visit to the museum. I hope you found this interesting, and it's definitely well worth a visit if you're in the area. Although the Model Engineering Society exhibit won't be there now, obviously, but if you're in the area, it's well worth a visit to this museum. There's lots of other things to see. There's the basement and various other galleries which I haven't shown on here. I've included some still pictures on the end of this video if you're interested in looking at them. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video and found it interesting, and thanks for watching.